Hey guys, I like starting off this course talking about exactly what science is and how astronomy is a science. Usually, whenever the first day of school, I always have students in the hallway and they come in and they say, "Is this astrology class?" And I always say, "No, no, no, this isn't astrology class. This is astronomy class because there's a big difference between the two." So, astronomy is a science, and then astrology, that's actually a belief system. So, we're going to talk about the differences between astrology and astronomy. And today I just want to talk about what exactly science is. So you've learned this in every single science course you've had before, but you're doing science whenever you are using the scientific method. So this is just a little PowerPoint just going over the steps of the scientific method, the steps that I want you to know. I've tried to make this as basic as possible and just use like real world experience to explain the scientific method. So the first thing I want you to know though is I want you to know what exactly is science. So, what is science? And you might come up with a long, drawn out answer, trying to be very scientific in your answer. And I don't want that in this class. I like simple, basic explanations and answers. So, for what is science, very simply, anytime you are searching for the truth to the answer of a question, you're doing science. So, if you have a question and you're trying to figure out what that answer is, you are doing science. And you're doing science by using the scientific method. So usually first day of school, you always see the girls in the hallways and they're dressed up. And I always ask them on the first day, I said, well, how did you go about picking out your outfit this morning? Was it something you did this morning or did you have it planned for a while? And so we talk about the steps of how, you might have picked out that outfit and how you went through and looked at 5 different stores trying to figure out the right dress to wear on the first day of school. That would be the scientific method. How did you get to school today? Was there traffic? Did you have to go around, use different roads? That would be using the scientific method. So anytime you're doing science, you're using the scientific method. And very simply, science is the search for truth. That's what I want you to know for science. So science is just anytime you're searching for the truth to an answer, you are doing science, using the scientific method. So the example I'm going to use in this PowerPoint, we are going to learn how to use the scientific method to solve this problem, and that's finding a date for Friday night. So let's say that Skip, he has a problem. It's Monday. He doesn't have a date for Friday night. He wants to find someone to go out with. So the first step in the scientific method, you might have heard this before in other classes, but anytime you have a problem, you always have to state the problem first. That's the first step in solving the problem. You have to state the problem. If you've ever heard of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is if you have a problem drinking, you have to admit that you have a problem drinking. So that's always the first step. You always state that you have a problem. So step 1, state the problem. I need a date for Friday night. So how are you going to go about solving that problem? So the next step you have to do, you have to actually do research. You have to figure out, if Skip needs a date for Friday night, what is he looking for? So is he looking for a woman? Does he want her tall? Does he want her short? Does he want her smart? Does he want her to be funny? Does he want her to be nice? What color hair does she have? What color are her eyes? What kind of body style does she have? Is she slim? Is she athletic? Those are all questions, those are all things you have to research in order to solve the problem. So what will it take to solve the problem? What do I need know? What do I need to know about my problem? So you're trying to examine the possibilities and eliminate poor choices and consider likely choices. Another thing you probably want her to have is to be single. So that would be something you need to figure out as well. Is she single? Is she available to go out on a date for Friday night? So that's step 2. Research the problem. Okay, step 3, very, very important step. Once you have eliminated poor choices and you have a choice that you think you want to ask out, the next step is you have to state your hypothesis or form your hypothesis, which is a solution to your problem, a possible solution. It might not be the solution, but it is a possible solution. So you have to say, my date will be Susie, for instance. So Skip wants to ask out Susie, so he says, my date will be Susie. Now, does that mean that that's actually going to be his date? Well, it might be. It might not be. In order to find that out, he first has to perform an experiment, and he does that by actually asking her out. So step 4, you're testing the problem by performing an experiment. And there's several ways he can do that. He might ask out Susie in a way that she likes, or he might ask her out in a way that she doesn't like. If he asks her out in a way she doesn't like, she'd probably say no. But if she ends up liking the way he asked and she likes him, then she might say yes. So step 4, test the problem, perform an experiment. Ask her out for Friday night. That's step 4. Now step 5, after you do the experiment, you have to draw conclusions based upon the results of the experiment. So there's 2 possible solutions that you can draw from that experiment. Either he has a date for Friday night and it will be Susie, or he doesn't have a date for Friday night yet and it is not Susie. So conclusion 1, he has a date, his problem is solved. Conclusion 2, he doesn't have a date yet. Now, if his hypothesis is incorrect, that does not mean that this is a failed experiment. He does not have a failed experiment because he learned something in the process of doing the experiment. Maybe he learned he shouldn't ask a girl out in the way he did. Or maybe he learned, he needs to make sure she's single, something like that. So just because a hypothesis does not correct this, that does not mean it is a failed experiment. It just means he needs to go back, do more research, and then perform another experiment by asking out someone else. So those are the 5 steps of the scientific method that I want you to know. First one, state the problem. Step 2, research the problem. Step 3, state the hypothesis. Step 4, experiment, test the problem. Step 5, draw conclusions based upon the results of the experiment. A couple of vocabulary words I would like for you to know. I want you to know what a hypothesis is. So a hypothesis is an educated guess to the answer of a problem. Just like we did in the experiment, it's an educated guess to the answer of a problem. So we're not saying that that is the answer. We're saying it is an answer that might be, it's something that might be the answer. Not sure until you do the experiment. Now a control, you might have heard of a control group before. So a control is something that does not change in the experiment. It's used to show that experiments are the results of the condition being tested. So the control in this case, who's asking the girl out? It has to be Skip every single time. So he would be the control. He is the one asking. Now, can Skip change things about how he asks? Yes, he can. And those things he changes, that would be called a variable. So something else as well that's not on here, a lot of times students get controls and constants mixed up. So a control is one of the, there's 2 groups. There's a control group and an experimental group. So a constant is something that stays the same in both the experimental group and the control group. So that's the difference. Don't get those 2 things mixed up. We said an experiment is a way of testing the hypothesis. And now for variables, there's 2 variables. You have a dependent variable and an independent variable. You, as the controller of the experiment, you always have control over the independent variable. So a variable, something that changes in the experiment. So an example would be, how does Skip ask the next girl out? So the way he asks the girl out, based upon how he asked, it will change the results of the experiment. That would be a variable. A theory, now this is a word that we're going to use in this class a lot. So astronomy is based on a whole lot of theories. So there's theories and laws. So you need to know this, this definition, so please make sure you get this. A theory is a logical explanation as to why something happens. Logical explanation for something that happens. Maybe you've heard of the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory is a theory about how we came to be where we are in the universe. It tries to explain how everything is expanding in the universe. That's just a theory. So a theory is a logical explanation for why something occurs. It is not something that can be proven. Theories you can't prove. It's just an explanation. So there can be lots of theories about one subject. For instance, when we start talking about the moon, we're going to talk about the different theories on how the moon formed. There are several theories about how the moon formed. We're not really sure because we weren't there. So it's just explanations as to why something happens, but they have to be logical. That's the key word there, is logical, which means you have to, provide evidence to back it up. So data is something that you collect during the actual experiment. And then the last thing here is a conclusion. A conclusion is a judgment based upon the results of the experiment. So those are the definitions, those are the words and the definitions that I want you to know for just, what is science? I'm sorry I'm going through this kind of fast. This is just a very basic, very simple PowerPoint as to what science is. And my next PowerPoint, the next step is I'm going to talk to you about the difference between astronomy and astrology. We're going to talk about the differences between theories and hypotheses and laws. So hopefully this makes sense and we can move on. Thank you.